American soldiers and German Wehrmacht troops are about to fight side by side against the SS. This actually happened, and it's the most impossible battle of World War II. May 5th, 1945. Hitler is dead, the Third Reich is collapsing, but in a medieval castle high in the Austrian Alps, former enemies are about to become brothers in arms. This is the story of Castle Itter, where the lines between friend and foe disappeared in the war's final hours. It's a tale so unbelievable that if it were fiction, no one would believe it. But it happened, and it changed everything we thought we knew about the end of World War II. To understand how this impossible alliance formed, you have to understand what was locked inside this ancient fortress. Castle Itter wasn't just any prison. It was a VIP detention center holding some of Europe's most important political leaders. Former French prime ministers who had tried to stop Hitler, military commanders who had planned the defense of France, and beloved democratic leaders who represented everything the Nazis despised. These weren't just prisoners of war. They were symbols of the democratic Europe Hitler had tried to destroy. For years, they had been kept alive as bargaining chips, but now they had become a deadly liability. The SS leadership had issued a chilling order: execute the high-value prisoners rather than let them fall into Allied hands. But what the SS didn't know was that one German officer was about to change everything. Major Josef Gangl of the German Wehrmacht was a career soldier who had served his country through the darkest years of the war. But by May 1945, he was watching that country tear itself apart. The Nazi regime was finished, Hitler was dead, and fanatical SS units were still fighting a war that existed only in their minds. Gangl made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. He decided to protect the prisoners. It wasn't about politics or ideology. It was about what was right. He couldn't stand by and watch the SS murder defenseless political prisoners in the war's final days. But Gangl couldn't do it alone. He found help in the most unlikely place: the Austrian resistance. Andreas Krobot, a local resistance leader, had been secretly monitoring the castle for months. His network of ordinary Austrians managed to get word to the advancing American forces with a simple but urgent message. There were important prisoners in Castle Itter, and the SS planned to kill them. The message reached Captain John C. Jack Lee Jr. of the 12th Armored Division. Lee was a tank commander who had been fighting his way across Europe for months, but nothing had prepared him for this. A German Wehrmacht officer was offering to help American forces liberate Allied prisoners from the SS. It sounded like madness, but it was about to get even more incredible. If you're finding this story as incredible as we are, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what other unbelievable moments from history you'd like us to cover. Trust us, this story gets even more unbelievable from here. Lee made the kind of decision that defines heroes. He decided to trust Major Gangl. On May 5th, 1945, a small American force set out for Castle Itter with their new German ally. It was a calculated risk that could have been a trap, but Lee understood what was at stake. These prisoners could help rebuild democratic Europe after the war. The American force was small, just a handful of tanks and soldiers, but they picked up even more unlikely allies along the way: German soldiers who had been liberated from their own army. These men had decided, like Gangl, that they would rather fight alongside Americans than die for a regime that had already lost the war. By the time they reached Castle Itter, the situation had become desperate. SS Oberführer Alois Rieger had arrived with fanatical SS troops who had received orders to eliminate the prisoners before the Americans could reach them. These weren't ordinary German soldiers who might surrender. These were true believers who would rather die fighting than accept defeat. What happened next would shock even these battle-hardened soldiers. The castle itself was a defender's nightmare and dream at the same time. Its medieval walls were thick and strong, but they had been built for arrows and siege engines, not modern weapons. The approaches were limited, which helped the defenders, but the SS had superior numbers and were willing to take massive casualties to complete their mission. Inside the castle, an extraordinary scene was unfolding. French political leaders, who had spent years in Nazi prisons, were now being defended by German soldiers who had once served the regime that imprisoned them. American GIs were taking tactical advice from Wehrmacht officers who had been their enemies just days before. It was the kind of moment that could only happen in the chaos of a war's end, when old certainties crumbled and human decency cut across enemy lines. The siege began in earnest on the morning of May 5th. Riga's SS troops surrounded the castle and demanded the surrender of the prisoners. When that was refused, they opened fire. The defenders, this impossible mixture of Americans, Germans, Austrian resistance fighters, and even some of the liberated French prisoners who had grabbed weapons, fought back with everything they had. But the SS had one more surprise that would test this alliance to its breaking point. The battle was fierce and personal. This wasn't about territory or strategic objectives. It was about whether decent people would allow fanatics to commit murder in the war's final hours. Major Gangel fought beside American soldiers, coordinating the defense with the same tactical skill he had used throughout the war, but now for a completely different cause. Captain Lee's tanks provided crucial firepower, but they couldn't cover every approach to the medieval fortress. The SS troops used the castle's own ancient design against its defenders, finding ways to get close to the walls where modern weapons were less effective. The fighting was often hand-to-hand, with rifles, pistols, and even makeshift weapons becoming the tools of survival. And then Gangel made a decision that would cost him everything. In the most heroic moment of the battle, Major Gangel was struck down while defending the main gate. The German officer who had risked everything to save Allied prisoners died fighting alongside American soldiers against his own countrymen. His death became a symbol of how the war's end had scrambled every assumption about loyalty and enemy. But Gangel's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The defense held. The SS assault was thrown back with heavy losses, and Riga's fanatical troops found themselves facing a defense that simply would not break. The impossible alliance of Americans and Germans had worked. The prisoners were safe. Within hours, additional American forces arrived to reinforce the castle. The SS troops, finally understanding that their war was truly over, melted away into the Austrian countryside. The high-profile prisoners were liberated, just days before the official end of the war in Europe. Share this incredible story with someone who thinks they know everything about World War II, because this battle changes everything we thought we knew about the war's end. The liberation of Castle Itter was more than just a successful rescue mission. It was a moment when former enemies discovered they had more in common than they had ever realized. Major Gangel became the only German Wehrmacht officer to die fighting alongside American forces in World War II, a sacrifice that symbolized the possibility of redemption even in war's darkest hours. The freed prisoners returned to help rebuild democratic Europe, using their experiences to shape a continent determined never to repeat the horrors they had witnessed. But perhaps most importantly, their rescue proved that even in the chaos of a collapsing regime, individual choices still mattered. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories that reveal the hidden moments that shaped our world, and let us know in the comments what other unbelievable historical events you think deserve to be told. History is full of moments that seem too incredible to be true, but sometimes the most impossible stories are the ones that matter most.